Hi, I'm Parneet Jaggi, and in this video, we're going to be taking up the characters and themes presented in the essay The Spectator Club, written by Richard Steele. Now, as we know, Richard Steele was a pioneer in the publication as well as in the publicity of the essays in the common masses of England. We see that during the early part of the 1700s, Joseph Addison uh, and Richard Steele, they came together to write these two magazines, The Tatler and The Spectator. And through their hardships of life, they came about understanding what others were feeling and the actions that they took. So both of them together in partnership, they documented 555 essays that were depicted from the world around them. And they used the feeling of love to show how human nature and what it did to achieve its goals. And we see that through this essay, The Spectator Club, Richard Steele has tried to portray the representative figures of the England of his times. And we also notice that the England of his times was actually full of a variety of people, among those who represented the educated class, the nobility, the barons, the knights, and also the class of the clergymen. So here we have a variety of characters that we are going to be looking in brief in this lecture. So the first character among these was Roger de Coverley. This Roger de Coverley is by far the most important character also of this essay. And Steele talks about him in a very colorful way, in a very positive light. And he says that the people who knew about this county of Sir Roger knew the character of Sir Roger, because he was a man of extraordinary nature, a very good sense of understanding, a very unusual nature which actually never made enemies for them. This person had a unique capacity to please others, and he remained a bachelor once he was disappointed in love of a beautiful widow. But before that, when we look at his background, he was a jovial, happy young man, and he moved in society of important people like Lord Rochester and George Etheridge. Now, we see that his character, after having been ditched by a widow, he loses interest in social life, he loses his joviality, but soon recovers from this. But now, in the present time, when he is described, he's a bit careless about his dress. He wears a jacket and a coat of a cut that was fashionable in his own time. He's around 56 years of age, but looks quite hale and hearty. He has his own property in the village and town. He has a good nature. He treats a servant well. And he is also the justice of the quorum and had exceptional judicial qualities. The next character that he describes is another companion of this club who's a lawyer, who is also a bachelor, a person of sharp wit and clear understanding who chose this occupation of the lawyer to obey his father, not according to his own interest and tendencies. And he was himself was more interested in study of drama and dramatic criticism. And because his wit was sharp, his mind was very sharp, Aristotle and Longinus, these philosophers were very clear to him. And he was presented challenges and questions on law by his father, which he would soon solve. And he would even outwit his father by getting them all answered through a lawyer he had engaged as an assistant. So we see that nobody could make him a fool, and he had a great wit. He was a good reader, loved to read books. He was familiar with the culture, customs, actions, and manners of his ancient writers. So he was a good critic also. And the presence of an able critic among the audience would rouse the actors to give the best performance possible. So he was a kind of a center of attraction in most of the parties. Now, this next character that we have is Sir Andrew Freeport, who is a good businessman from London. He's hardworking, laborious, experienced, and has a great understanding of his work. His knowledge of trade and commerce is extensive, and he has his own ideals and philosophies of enlarging and increasing the country's trade. And he was more interested in increasing the dominion of the trade through art and industry than by power. And he was of the view that diligence, carefulness, or industry alone would help the country to gain things of permanent value. And on the other hand, idleness, sloth means laziness, more than the sword had caused ruin of many nations. He knew short maxims, he had a unique art of speech, he was a self made person, and and he became richer, and he believed that England could become richer than other kingdoms by methods that so benefited him. Then we have Captain Sentry, who is a courageous, intelligent, and a wise man. He is wise, he is potential, but he has not been rewarded the proper merit for his abilities. He has been a captain in military for some years, fought bravely on friends, but he had to leave the army because he could not get promotion in spite of his meritorious service. Then he was of the opinion that it is cowardice to be too modest, to be too humble, and a person who failed to assert himself, to demand something for his rights which was due to him, was a coward. So he himself, because he could not assert his rights and demand, he felt that very badly. He was frank in speaking. This frankness was essential part of his character. Though he commanded many people in military, he was never arrogant or proud or haughty. He was never a flatterer, although he obeyed his superiors. Then we have the character of Will Honeycomb. He was old, but there were no traces of that old age on his brain or in his personality. He had an attractive personality, could impress women by his talk. He dressed well and was quite familiar with the history of every fashion that remained in vogue in England. He was interested in matters that related to women. He mostly talked of women, their dresses, their manners, their fashions. He had a good knowledge of history. He could even tell about the hairstyles or hats of the wives and daughters that resembled to the wenches of French kings. But Steele says here that he was a thorough gentleman. Apart from the relations of women, he was an honest and a worthy man. The last character of the essay is about a clergyman, a person from a church who was also a philosopher. He lived a sacred life, but he was very weak in constitution, means he was physically fragile. He had ill health. Because of his poor health, he could not complete the responsibilities which promotion in the church might have brought him. And he spoke well on divine topics, and he wished for the good of the world even after his death. Now, these were the characters that have been highlighted in the essay. When we talk of the theme of the essay, the styles of Addison and Steele were actually actuated to a great extent by the temper and mood of the times in which they lived. After 1688, the middle class in England rose to positions of power in the state and made its influence felt among all the classes, whether it was the merchants or the financiers or the statesmen. So the new era at that time aimed at a compromise between the aristocratic temper of moral freedom of Restoration period and the Puritan spirit, which the excesses of the Commonwealth had brought into repute. Now this was the task of Addison and Steele, to blend, to reconcile the opposing tendencies of their times. And this task was effected psychologically through the stylistic presentations of these essayists who were able to bring about this synthesis. Now, middle class patrons frequented the coffee houses in those times with other members of London society, and it was there that public opinion was formed. And in the coffee house group, that successful writer must make his appeal. So we see that in those times in early 18th century literature, it was to a great extent reactionary to the normal, traditional, conventional literature, which was of the preceding period, earlier writers. So the works were extraordinarily chaste in expression and very polished. The classical period, the classical school even demanded great correctness and discipline and was generally inspired by the Latin writings. But here, the styles utilized by Addison and Steele were actually in tune, in accord with the literary trend. And various classes of the society found equal enjoyment in the Spectator because there was polished speech and there was philosophic reasoning and even the classical influence. So these two writers were able to get into tune with the prevailing temper of their times in London, and hence the popularity of their journal Statler in the Spectator, and hence the importance of this essay, The Spectator Club. So, this was my analysis of the essay The Spectator Club. Thank you for now.